The silent arrival, the vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before monitoring Station Theta 9, a lonely sentinel at the edge of the Zelkari Empire's territory. Lieutenant Korvax sat at his sensor console, his forearms moving across multiple keyboards as he performed the routine scans that had yielded nothing interesting for the past 3 years of his assignment. The monotony of border patrol duty was about to shatter in ways he could never imagine. A single blip appeared on his screen, then vanished, then reappeared. Korvax rubbed his primary eyes and leaned forward. The signature was unlike anything in the Zelkari database. It moved with purpose, crossing the clearly marked border without hesitation or concern. The vessel's configuration defied conventional design philosophy. Where Zelkari ships were built with obvious weapons arrays and heavy armor plating, this ship was smooth, almost organic in its curves. It absorbed sensor pings rather than reflecting them, making exact measurements difficult. Commander Yarrick rushed to the monitoring station after receiving Korvax's urgent message. The commander was a veteran of the Spiral Wars, his carapace bearing the scars of a dozen campaigns. He studied the readings with growing unease. The ship's energy signature was impossible. It seemed to be generating power levels that should require a vessel 10 times its apparent size. More disturbing was its trajectory. It headed straight for Zelkar Prime, the Empire's capital world, as if it knew exactly where to go. The commander initiated first contact protocols. On every frequency and every known language, he broadcast the same message. This was Zelkari Imperial Space. The unknown vessel must identify itself immediately or face destruction. The silence that answered was deafening, not even static. The ship continued forward at a steady pace, neither accelerating nor slowing. It moved through space like it owned it. Deep in the Imperial Palace on Zelkar Prime, Supreme Admiral Torvin received the emergency transmission. He was in the middle of a ceremonial dinner, celebrating the anniversary of the Empire's victory over the Quakes coalition. The other military leaders around him fell silent as his expression changed from annoyance to concern. A single ship dared to violate their borders. The insult could not stand. Torvin excused himself and headed to the Strategic Command Center. The war room buzzed with activity as Torvin entered. 3-dimensional holographic displays showed the intruder's path and projected course. Intelligence officers scrambled through databases trying to identify the vessel's origin. Then someone found it, a match in the historical archives. The configuration was human. The room fell silent. Humans had been gone for 50 years, their entire civilization seemingly vanishing overnight after some incident near the Corvin Nebula. Admiral Torvin made his decision quickly. He ordered the deployment of Task Force Crimson, 3 of the Empire's newest destroyers equipped with quantum torpedoes and particle beam weapons. Captain Zelaya commanded the lead ship, Infinite Fury. She was young for her rank but had proven herself in combat against pirates and raiders. As her task force approached the human vessel, she felt confident. 3 modern warships against 1 outdated human relic. The outcome seemed certain. The human ship did not react to their approach. It maintained course and speed, seemingly oblivious to the threat bearing down on it. Zelaya ordered her ships into attack formation. They formed a perfect triangle, ensuring overlapping fields of fire. She gave the human vessel one final chance to respond. State your purpose in Zelkari space. You have 10 seconds to comply. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The human ship remained silent. 3, 2, 1. Fire erupted from the Zelkari destroyers. Quantum torpedoes streaked through space, their warheads capable of devastating entire city blocks. Particle beams lanced out, concentrated energy that could slice through meter-thick armor plating. The barrage was perfectly coordinated, timed to impact simultaneously. The explosions were brilliant, lighting up the darkness of space. When the light faded, Zelaya expected to see debris. Instead, the human ship remained untouched. It had not raised shields. The weapons had simply ceased to exist the moment they should have made contact. The human ship's surface rippled slightly, like water disturbed by a pebble. Then it responded. 3 thin beams of light, barely visible, reached out from the human vessel. They touched each destroyer for less than a second. The Infinite Fury systems died instantly. Every screen went dark, every light extinguished. The crew had seconds to realize their life support had failed before the cold of space began creeping in. The second destroyer, Warrior's Pride, tried to flee. Its engines flared to maximum power, attempting an emergency jump to hyperspace. The beam caught it mid-transition. The ship stretched impossibly, trapped between dimensions before snapping back to normal space in 1,000 pieces. The third destroyer, Final Judgment, launched escape pods and surrendered. The human ship ignored both the pods and the surrender. The beam touched it, and like its sisters, it went dark and silent. Back on Zelkar Prime, panic spread through the military command. 3 destroyers, each capable of subduing an entire star system, had been neutralized in seconds. The human ship had not even altered course. It continued toward the capital at the same measured pace. Emergency sessions were called. The Imperial Council convened. Fear, an emotion the Zelkari had not felt in centuries of dominance, crept through the highest levels of government. Emperor Kratos himself emerged from his meditation chambers. He was ancient even by Zelkari standards and had ruled for over 200 years. He had overseen the Empire's expansion from 12 worlds to over 1,000. He had broken the Krex coalition and absorbed the Vindari Federation. But as he looked at the reports of the human ship's capabilities, he felt something he had not experienced since his youth. Uncertainty. The historical archives were opened, their contents reviewed with new urgency. 50 years ago, humanity had been a minor player in galactic politics. They controlled perhaps 30 worlds, their technology adequate but unremarkable. They traded freely, participated in diplomatic councils, and showed no signs of aggression. Then came the Corvin incident. The records were frustratingly vague. Some kind of conflict near the Corvin Nebula involving human colonists. The details had been classified at the highest levels. What followed was even more puzzling. Humanity had not protested or demanded justice. They had simply withdrawn. Every human ship returned to human space. Every embassy closed. Every trade route terminated. They had erected an impenetrable barrier around their territory and vanished from galactic civilization. Most species had assumed they had turned inward, perhaps fallen into civil war or technological stagnation. The arrival of this ship suggested something very different had occurred. Admiral Torvin studied the tactical data from the destroyed task force. The weapon used by the human ship was unlike anything in known military science. It had not destroyed the Zelkari vessels in any conventional sense. It had simply turned them off like flipping a switch. Every atom remained in place, but the fundamental forces holding them together as functional matter had been severed. It was technology that should not exist, that violated the understood laws of physics. The Defense Ministry calculated scenarios. If the human ship maintained its current pace, it would reach Zelkar Prime in 72 hours. They could evacuate the government, flee to the outer colonies. But what was the point? If humanity possessed such overwhelming technological superiority, running would only delay the inevitable. Others suggested negotiation, but the human ship had ignored every attempt at communication. It came forward like a force of nature, unstoppable and indifferent. In the Emperor's private chambers, Kratos met with his closest advisors. The Minister of Intelligence, Varkan, had managed to decode fragments of old transmissions from the time of the Corvin incident. What he discovered chilled them all. The Corvin Nebula had harbored a human colony ship carrying 40,000 civilians, families seeking new worlds beyond the crowded core systems. They had been attacked not by pirates or raiders, but by ships bearing Zelkari Imperial markings. The records of the attack had been buried, hidden by previous administrations to avoid scandal. The colony ship had sent distress signals for hours as Zelkari forces, mistaking them for Krex Coalition vessels, had systematically destroyed their defensive escorts and boarded the civilian ship. By the time the error was discovered, all 40,000 colonists were dead. The Empire had covered it up, classifying all records and eliminating witnesses. They had assumed humanity would never learn the truth. Emperor Kratos felt the weight of his empire's sins settling on his shoulders. The humans had known. They had always known. And they had spent 50 years preparing their response. The approaching ship was not a scout or an invasion force. It was something far more terrifying. It was judgment. As the human vessel drew closer to Zelkar Prime, its silent approach more menacing than any battle cry, the Empire could only wait and wonder what price humanity would demand for the blood of 40,000 innocents. The reckoning Admiral Torvin stood on the bridge of the Imperial flagship Eternal Dominion, watching the assembled might of the Zelkari Empire spread across space. 150 warships had gathered in the Zelkar system, the largest fleet concentration in the Empire's history. Dreadnoughts, battlecruisers, carriers, and countless support vessels formed a defensive sphere around the capital world. If overwhelming firepower could stop the human ship, this would be humanity's grave. The human vessel appeared at the system's edge exactly when predicted. It had not used any form of faster-than-light travel the Zelkari recognized. It simply arrived as if space itself had bent to accommodate its journey. The ship looked even smaller against the backdrop of the assembled fleet, a dark needle against the star-filled void. Yet every officer watching their sensors felt their confidence waver. This ship had destroyed everything sent against it without apparent effort. Torvin opened a channel to the entire fleet. Today they stood not just as warriors of the Empire, but as protectors of their entire civilization. He spoke of duty, of honor, of the glory that would come to those who stopped this threat. But even as he delivered his speech, he wondered if any of them would survive to claim that glory. The human ship approached at its steady, inevitable pace. It would reach weapons range in 30 minutes. The tactical computers ran continuous simulations. Every possible attack pattern, every combination of weapons, every strategic formation was analyzed. The results were consistent and discouraging. Without understanding the human ship's defensive capabilities, they were fighting blind. Some officers suggested ramming attacks using their ships as massive kinetic weapons. Others proposed detonating their own reactors at close range. Desperation bred desperate strategies. Then, 20 minutes from engagement range, the human ship did something unexpected. It transmitted a message, not in code or alien language, but in perfect Zelkari. The voice was female, calm, and carried no emotion. This was Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran diplomatic vessel Remembrance. The Zelkari Empire would cease all hostile actions immediately. One representative would be permitted to board for negotiations. They had 10 minutes to comply. The bridge erupted in debate. It was a trap, some argued. Others saw it as an opportunity to gather intelligence. Emperor Kratos himself made the decision. He would go personally. His advisors protested vehemently. The Emperor of the Zelkari did not negotiate with single ships. He did not put himself at risk. But Kratos understood something they did not. This was not a negotiation between equals. This was a surrender, and he would not send others to bear that shame. A single shuttle departed from Zelkar Prime, carrying Emperor Kratos and a minimal honor guard. As it approached the human ship, a section of the dark hull simply opened, revealing a docking bay lit with soft blue light. The shuttle entered, and the hull sealed behind it. Inside, the Emperor found himself in a room that defied expectation. Instead of military austerity, he saw gardens. Living trees and flowing water decorated a space that seemed impossibly large for the ship's exterior dimensions. Captain Chen waited in what she called the contemplation chamber. She was smaller than Kratos had expected, standing barely half his height. Her hair was gray, her face lined with age, but her eyes held a sharpness that cut through pretense. She did not bow or show deference. She simply gestured for him to sit. The chair that appeared from the floor perfectly accommodated his alien physiology, a subtle demonstration of their complete understanding of his species. Chen spoke without preamble. 50 years ago, the Zelkari Empire murdered 40,000 human civilians, men, women, and children seeking nothing more than new homes among the stars. The Empire had covered up this crime, hidden it from their own people and the galaxy at large. Humanity had discovered the truth within days. The question that had consumed them since was not whether to respond, but how to ensure such an atrocity never happened again. Kratos tried to explain. It had been a mistake, a terrible error in ship identification during a time of war. The officers responsible had been punished. The cover-up was to prevent destabilization of the region. Each excuse sounded hollow even to his own ears. Chen listened without interrupting, her expression never changing. When he finished, she stood and walked to a wall that became transparent, revealing space outside. The Zelkari fleet hung there, weapons powered but frozen in indecision. She explained what humanity had done during their 50 years of isolation. They had not built weapons of war. They had transcended them. The ship they were on was not armed in any conventional sense. It simply manipulated the fundamental forces of reality. They could accelerate entropy, unravel molecular bonds, or alter the quantum states of matter. The 3 destroyers had not been destroyed. They had been carefully deconstructed and their patterns stored. Their crews were alive, suspended in quantum stasis, awaiting humanity's decision on their fate. The demonstration that followed broke Kratos' understanding of possible. Chen gestured, and a section of space near the fleet rippled. A Zelkari battlecruiser, one that had been destroyed in the Spiral Wars decades ago, materialized complete and functional. Another gesture and it vanished again. They could resurrect or eliminate matter at will. The entire Zelkari fleet, the entire Zelkari Empire, existed at humanity's sufferance. They had developed not weapons but the power of gods. Yet humanity had not come for vengeance. Chen explained that transcending physical limitations had come with transcending emotional ones as well. They understood that cycles of violence solved nothing, but neither could they allow civilizations that committed such atrocities to continue without consequence. The Zelkari Empire would not be destroyed. It would be changed. Humanity would place observers throughout their territory, invisible and undetectable, who would ensure no such massacre ever occurred again. Furthermore, the Empire would acknowledge their crime publicly. The truth of the Corvin incident would be broadcast to every world, every citizen. They would establish memorials to the 40,000 dead and restructure their military doctrine to prioritize the protection of civilian lives above all else. Any future aggression against civilian populations of any species would result in the immediate dissolution of their military capabilities. Not destruction, simply removal. Their weapons would cease to function permanently. Kratos wanted to refuse. His pride as emperor, as a Zelkari, demanded he reject such terms. But he had seen what one human ship could do. Chen mentioned, almost casually, that Remembrance was one of their smaller vessels. They had 100 like it, and ships that dwarfed it in capability. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy because they chose not to, not because they could not. The choice before him was simple: accept the terms or watch his empire cease to exist. The negotiation, if it could be called that, lasted 3 hours. Chen was not cruel or vindictive. She showed him records of other civilizations that had accepted similar terms after committing atrocities. They had flourished, freed from the burden of military expansion to focus on art, science, and culture. The Brazari Collective, once feared raiders, were now the galaxy's premier artists. The Vegan war clans had become philosophers and teachers. Transformation was possible. When Kratos returned to his ship, he carried humanity's terms in a device no larger than his hand. When activated, it would broadcast the truth to every communication system in the Empire simultaneously. His admirals waited for orders to attack, to die gloriously in defense of their empire. Instead, he ordered them to stand down. The Empire would survive, but it would never be the same. As the human ship departed, moving toward the next civilization on its list, Kratos activated the device. The truth spread across the Empire like wildfire. The initial shock gave way to anger, then shame, and finally, for some, acceptance. The military-industrial complex that had driven Zelkari society for millennia crumbled within months. Some colonies declared independence, others demanded reforms. Through it all, the invisible human observers ensured that the transformation, however painful, remained peaceful. No world burned. No population faced reprisal. Captain Chen filed her report as Remembrance moved toward its next destination. The Zelkari were the 17th civilization to receive judgment. Each had reacted differently, but all had ultimately accepted the new reality. Humanity had become the galaxy's invisible guardians, not through conquest but through the simple demonstration that conquest itself was obsolete. The age of empires built on blood was ending. What would replace it remained to be seen, but it would be built on a foundation of justice, not might. The story of the lone human warship spread throughout the galaxy, growing with each telling. Some called humanity saviors, others called them tyrants, but all understood the fundamental truth. The humans had returned not as conquerors but as teachers, showing the galaxy that true power lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to refrain from destruction. The Empire had trembled in fear at their arrival, but in the end it was not fear but hope that humanity brought to the stars.